Hello, everybody. Welcome to the What Culture Film and TV podcast. I'm your host, Scott Tailford, joined by James Hunt.
Hello.
And joined by Ewan Patterson.
Hello.
And we're going to break down all sorts of thoughts and general ramblings around Captain Marvel because we've all finally seen it now, and it's a bit of a talking point in time. So we'll start with general thoughts and expectations versus outcome. Mr. James, what do you think?
My expectations weren't really high for this. I don't think the trailers were very good. They didn't do a good job of selling the movie. And when you see the movie, you kind of understand why, because obviously they keep some stuff hidden. But I think it's kind of like the median of the MCU. It's like 3.5 stars. It's pretty good. I had a good time. Nothing amazing.
A bit formulaic in spots.
Yeah.
But yeah, you see what they're going for. Good to see, Ewan.
Kind of similar to James, actually, before release. I looked at the trailers and I was kind of a little bit disappointed by how much they were holding back. Obviously, under the pretense, I thought originally of they're going to have loads of like mind-blowing effects. And obviously, the film, I think, is actually quietly subversive in a few different ways, apart from the obvious fact it's a female-fronted superhero film, which is really good to see in 2019. But also the kind of the stuff they changed, the source material, I actually think there is probably more to this than people are potentially giving it credit for. I came away pleasantly surprised. I think I gave it 4 stars in my own personal little review. So
the old letterbox on there.
I think I probably enjoyed it the most out of all of you guys.
Yes, I think you're the most positive out of us. If you've seen the review that went up on like release day or whatever, I ended up going with 2.5 stars. Boo me. But I just thought, I don't know. I remember we were all very similar in terms of the lead up. We were all like, the trailer seems to be holding something back, and it seems like her performance is really very strong, and I like her presence on screen. Like I absolutely love Brie Larson as an actress and just as a presence on screen. But I just thought that, like, you talk about expectations versus outcome. For me, it was exactly what I thought. I just thought it was so one-dimensional, and like I wanted way more to her. And you do see like like aspects of her, like, I don't know, warmer personality sort of come through when she's hanging out with Nick Fury. There's some good chemistry there, and I do think that as a placement in the saga, it's only going to get better from here, kind of thing. So I kind of have hope for that. But I just, as I was watching it all unfold, I was like, I'm not on board with like her struggle or like anything. I was like, she hasn't got like a flaw to overcome. I just didn't really get anything from her other than like I said, it felt like a very one-dimensional performance. At least that was my take anyway. And that's how I thought that she came across in the trailers too. So that was my whole thing. But I know that you got way more out of that in terms of like the way that it all came together.
I wouldn't call the performance one-dimensional. I definitely understand the criticism I've heard that people want to see more of Carol back when she was a fighter pilot. But I also think the way they present her origin story as being a bit of mystery means they can't do that. True. And actually, I think Larson's performance is actually really good. I really like the way she kind of is you can kind of tell that something isn't right from the very get-go. And obviously, if you're familiar with the comics, you know that's the case anyway. But also the whole idea of her being this like cocky fighter who needs to master their abilities and stuff, and it's very the movie presents it as being cliched, and it's very aware of that fact. So when they get to subvert that cliche later in the film, I think Larson has a lot of fun with it, and I really like her banter with Nick Fury, like you said earlier on, and also the way she kind of once she clicks on to what's been going on. I think that moment she realizes is, I think, when she's kind of hugging it out with Maria.
That's a nice scene.
I think that's wonderful. That stuff, that whole element of her kind of reconnecting with their past, I think she does that very well. So
I think, one of the things we talked about before launch was that assumption that, like, she is under like sort of not necessarily Kree mind control, but she has like an inhibitor thing on her neck to prevent her being like fully powered, and so that you can play that into the performance. Like, it does get more fleshed out as you go, and I like that in terms of like just a starting point for her overall, and in terms of where she is in the movie. But yeah, like, do you think that she has way more? There's more places to go. Like, we'll get to the post-credit stuff later, but we know that she plays a major role in Endgame. Do you see her being written in mostly the same way in Endgame as well, or similar sort of thing?
No, I think they'll see more of kind of like that human side to her. I think obviously in this one, because so much of it she's figuring out who she is, she doesn't have her memories. I think once she has all of that back and she can really be Captain Marvel sort of thing, going forward.
The whole thing, one of the things that I talked about a little bit in the review is like her power set. Like, obviously you have super strength, you have flight, you have like photon beams out the wazoo. You have a lot of different things that she can just turn up and I love that scene at the end where she's just tearing through the ships. But I thought her hand-to-hand combat, like, I love that Larson like worked herself, like just really worked herself so much past the last getting in shape and like, getting really good at the choreography and all that kind of stuff. I think her physical presence on screen is great, so I hope to see a lot more of that in Endgame. But I guess that's another question, is where do they go from here in terms of it? Like, she seems so on top of. She's at the peak of her performance.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell? What can even happen?
I think
now?
that's kind of the point. And there's the whole bit, kind of doing this in a very non-linear Tarantino-esque way, but going to the end of the film when Jon Rog's there, like, I always said you'd be ready if you faced me hand to hand, and she just kind of turns around and was like, well, you're not worth my time. Screw you. And then blasts. I think that's the perfect way to handle that kind of character in the MCU, because we've already seen it done that way with Thor. I don't necessarily think that there needs to be a gradient in terms of how Carol develops the powers going forward, because at the end of the film anyway, she becomes the binary form, which she only gets in the comics when she's experimented on by the Brood. So it seems as though they're just kind of going straight through that. So that is
Can you
Carol.
explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, so in the comics, she basically, for a long period of time, she's kind of hanging around with the X-Men. Rogue steals the powers. They go on spacey adventures. And then the Brood, who have already appeared in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I think, they end up experimenting on her, and she kind of unlocks this new form of binary, which is the kind of glowing Dragon Ball Z-esque thing you see at the end of the film. I definitely think we haven't seen the full extent of her powers. There is definitely more to come. Like, in this, she kind of takes out a bunch of, like, ICBMs over the Earth, but I think in Endgame, depending on how that story goes, because literally we know nothing about the villains in this going forward, I think we'll see Captain Marvel really F the shiz up. So yeah,
I do quite like them doing essentially an origin story. Well, not necessarily an origin story in reverse, but a character arc in reverse. It's like it's like Superman. You give him like the full set of powers at the beginning, and you learn to deal with that going forward. And like, you know, one of the most fascinating ways to think about Superman's power set is like he has the ability to do X, Y, Z like as much as possible. And how do you deal with that level of responsibility? That's something that they can do with Captain Marvel. With Endgame. But I wonder, like, just in terms of the writing staff, like, you know, you've got Stephen McFeely, and I always forget the
Christopher Marcus, the G's,
being given like Captain Marvel and sort of putting her into the Endgame story. Like, yeah, I'm curious to see what happens from there. Let's move on to talk about the star of the show, the arguable star of the show, Good Sir Goose. Good Sir Goose the cat.
Oh, Goose.
Which heart. I'm not gonna lie, it was just a cat.
It's not
just a cat.
It's definitely not a cat
with a squid head.
This is of all the things you said, Scott Tailford, this is the most
controversial.
controversial.
I'll baseline this by just saying that everyone's saying that it stole the scenes. If a cat stole a scene, what does that say about the rest of the cast?
Nothing, because that cat is designed to steal the scenes. Like
when you watch,
like BB-8 in The Force Awakens,
or Groot in Guardians.
Yeah, they're designed to they steal the show because they're like comic relief type characters.
And no one knows.
That's why they're memorable.
No one knew before, well, apart from me. Because I'm a nerd. No one knew before this going in that Goose was a flirkin, and that was what flirkins do.
Has that always been a thing?
Yes, yes. So like the idea of that was always going to be subverted, and I was one of the things I was looking forward to with this film was seeing people react to it in the cinemas, and the noises I heard in that cinema on Friday were absolutely incredible when the moment happened. I don't think it's necessary. It's not a slight against anyone in the cast. I think that's just how the Goose is meant to be.
Yeah, I'm taking like a wider sort of approach to it. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like when the reveal happens and the big squid head and the whole thing with eating the Tesseract, I was like, oh yeah, fine. You know, comics, I like some comic book nonsense. And like the whole thing with the Flurkin is that it's got tiny pockets of reality inside it, which is why it can eat a Tesseract. All that stuff is fine, I guess. And I did like the cat too, but I think we've got it down as a separate talking point. And so as I came out, and then you see the reaction online, everyone's like, "Oh my god, Goose!" And I'm like, "Yeah, like it's fine, but like to hang the movie on the cat, like to some degree." Is like a thing.
Have you seen the internet? Like,
cats. Why didn't it put any toast on its head? Okay, if we're gonna do a full-on cat thing, where was the toast on its head? Because that's what I want to see.
I don't even like cats.
No, you don't. You're a dog person.
But this cat is flirkin. Awesome.
I mean, I guess so. I mean, the thing that I saw they had in the early teasers, the early posters and stuff, was and this might be a thing. This could be me misreading the posters, but I thought Captain Marvel and Goose / whatever her cat's originally called, Chewie. I thought they were more of like a two. Like when she saw the cat, it might spark some memories, and then they would be like, oh, it's she reunites with the cat. You don't really get a whole lot of that. Like there's a bit where it goes on her lap and she just throws it back into behind the ship.
I'm curious to see what they do with Goose in Endgame if they're still around, because I would be very, very much down for a Captain Marvel sequel where she kind of in the comics she kind of becomes this like Earth ambassador, and she basically goes around different solar systems and galaxies, basically being Earth's diplomat and getting up to shenanigans. And Chewie is always there. So I'm hoping that they don't just make this a one-and-done character, and you kind of will get to see that relationship between them get explored further on.
I mean, he's left in Shield at the end.
Yes,
the Shield HQ. So are we still meant to be getting a Fury movie?
Like, I don't think so. No.
Okay, because if they ever did that, they could have done some sort of weird ass cameo with that.
Goose v Thanos.
I mean, at this stage, yes, fine. Have
I'd be
sort of
very much
take
down
on.
for it at the end of Endgame. Thanos tries to get the gauntlet back on, and Goose just comes in and just gulps it down. Just like,
So we can talk about wider conceptual stuff, because some of the stuff that I genuinely loved was at the very beginning. I loved that they sort of did Captain Marvel's version of the Winter Soldier intro, which was like that idea that you take like the like a certain core, like a certain team, and you do their little like secret mission. And I like alien space missions, regardless of like what the Kree stand for or whatever. I like just seeing like alien space missions, and that really cool like top down wide shot where you see like all the different green, purple blaster bolts flying at each other. I was like, cool, give me more of this stuff. And then when she fell down to Earth, I was like, oh yeah, like there is like the rest of the movie that was in the trailers. What did you guys think of the way that they sort of portrayed the Kree and the Skrulls and all that introductory stuff?
Well, if I get into the Kree and the Skrulls, like, because I kind of think you have a point there with Earth. Like, there is a potential for that to be very Green Lantern in the sense that you have this amazing cosmic vastness out in the galaxy to explore, and that you're rooting it in Earth. But I think it's kind of necessary.
Yes.
And I really enjoy the chemistry that Larson has with Samuel Jackson. So I all enjoy all that. The thing that with me, with the Skrulls and the Kree, and the twist, if I may, is I think that the whole inspiration for the story arc is the Kree-Skrull War, which is a very seminal Marvel story written back in the 70s, which was a massive allegory for the Cold War. So back during then, the USA and the USSR were fighting loads of proxy wars, Vietnam, Korea. And basically, Marvel conceived this story as, what if Earth was one of these countries, but in the vastness of a giant,
in the middle of everything.
Giant kind of war fought between two superpowers, the Kree and the Skrull. And it was a very, very good way of making readers in the US recontextualize how the Cold War was perceived. I think it's a very, very interesting story. But one of the things we've seen Marvel do recently, even going back to 2008, is how they update that allegory. So like Tony Stark, no longer a figure of the military-industrial complex. He's now like a post-9/11 war on terror figure who comes to learn how his relationship to the arms industry is actually harmful. With this, we get a whole, with the twist of the Skrulls being refugees, it's like a whole kind of update on the refugee crisis almost. And I think that's very, very interesting to position the Kree in the official narrative being like, oh, we are the heroes, we're fighting against these Skrull subversives, but then in actual fact, it's a diaspora of peoples who are kind of floating across the galaxy. I think that's very interesting.
That's the stuff that I think that's one of the things that I genuinely love. Like, I mean, in terms of ever since like post Civil War, I think we've seen Marvel kind of, and I had like mentioned this in other videos and stuff, but we've seen Marvel go like, okay, like we need to break down like like the villains, we need to give them, there's more to them, they can't just be evil for the sake of being evil. And that twist with the Skrulls, like the execution of it, I think it leans into a bit of the old banter, a bit of the old wackiness. But you do get to, when they finally get up to the secret Kree base and you get to see like the actual, like the fledgling sort of the Skrulls on the run kind of thing, that stuff is fascinating. And then like you can play it out wider and get all the
and that was the thing that was so interesting, because I didn't expect it. And I thought when they got to the ship again, Talos would probably turn around and go, oh, the weapon's for us now. And thus this never-ending cycle would continue. But they didn't. They really leaned into it. I do think there is potentially some seeding where we could see the Skrulls come back under their original villainous guise, because when Talos kills the two Kree soldiers when they're being led to the ship, he specifically mentions to his partner to cover their child's eyes. And then as the Kree are dying, she looks back and the camera just lingers on it for a little bit.
As if she's got
and I
motivation.
wonder if there's going to be some sort of thing in Endgame or a future Captain Marvel film that is about generational conflict. How do people who are brought up in conflict perceive that kind of struggle? And that would be very interesting to see.
Yeah, I love it.
I don't think the twist is as clear cut as the Skrulls are now good guys necessarily. I do think we could see more nuance to the conflict in the future.
That's a perfect pivot, because so many theories leading up to Captain Marvel and obviously going into Endgame was that Secret Wars as an overall construct was going to infiltrate everything, and all of a sudden Black Widow's a Skrull. Secret Invasion. Secret Wars is the other one, but still a comic. But that whole thing that like, oh, this cast we've been with for so long, actually they're a Skrull all along, like whatever. Do you think the way that Captain Marvel reframes the Kree Skrull invasion, all that kind of stuff, essentially gets away from all that for now, because it is played, it's very much the Kree are the villains, the Skrull are on the run for now, and that's what we know. Like, do you still feel like, hey, by the way, X is a Skrull all along, can even work anymore?
Not in the way we kind of maybe anticipated it would. I think because we're so sympathetic to the Skrulls in this film, to then have, say, the end of Endgame be like, oh yeah, the Skrulls are actually bad guys, one film later. I don't think you really do that. And I think it's so dangerous to do Secret Invasion anyway. Not that I'm against it, but to do, say,
at this stage,
these characters you've been on a journey with for 10 years.
Completely agree.
One of them isn't who you thought he was. He's a Skrull all along.
Yeah.
That is so hard
and
to
the
do.
storyline was pretty bad. Like, I'm just
Right.
saying the actual secret invasion storyline in the comics is not well executed at all. And obviously there is a draw to like an invasion of the body snatchers style thing, but not when you've been with these characters for as long as you have.
Especially, I mean, I was watching an interview with Kevin Feige where he was saying that like one of the big like draws to Endgame is that you snap everyone out of existence other than that main cast. You still have Ant-Man, you still have Cap Marvel, but you're pretty much revisiting that Avengers cast from 2012 and then putting them through stuff again. And so if that's your foundation, to ruin that quote unquote by saying like, by the way, they're a Skrull, it almost doesn't work. The Skrull's power set though, I thought that it was shown off like really well. One of my favorite things in the movie is the Clarkson reveal. I call him Clarkson. What's his real name? Coulson. Clarkson? He's not even a thing, is it? But near enough. Because I was like, Clark Gregg is where I'm getting from. Coulson. And when he's in the car, and it's like the whole thing on the radio that like, oh, actually, I'm still here. And I was like, perfect, old school. It's in the car with you. It's in the room with you style reveal.
That's another thing as well. I'm so giddy that the Skrulls are in this. Like, I never thought they'd be in a film because, like, goodness knows, Fox are never going to do that. Or the Skrulls, they're a bit weird, aren't they? We can't have them in our film with a rock man and a man who is on fire. We can't do that. But then Marvel have just gone around, here the Skrulls,
21 movies later.
And I was so giddy throughout it. I was just
good.
oh my god, the Skrulls are so good.
So the wider Skrull context, the stuff from the comics. Have they ever done something like this before, where they sort of gave the Skrull? There's more to them than just these two big factional warfare.
No,
kind of thing?
usually they've been cut and dry as like villains. Like they originally, like, the whole kind of metaphor is that they're kind of Soviet subversion in America, kind of like the Cold War. So Talos, especially in the comics, is depicted as a bad guy, and then obviously with the Fantastic Four, one of their main villains is the Super Skrull. I think one of the things the MCU could do with this is still have those villainous factions, but much more in the sense that not all Skrulls are evil. They're not all inherently evil people.
Yeah.
Same for the Kree, possibly. Because Carol is kind of indoctrinated into Kree society and then breaks free. So I like the idea of adding more complexity to a very cut and dry conflict.
Oh, totally. I mean, I think in to bring another parallel across, like that's one of the things that I thought was so fascinating about Rogue One. Like that whole thing that Jin points out. It's like those were rebellion bombs that killed like her father and stuff. Spoilers. And there's little things like that where it's like we're going to explore that huge grey area because there's so much fascinating philosophical stuff you can pull apart in there. So I like that. To drop another point in, which I forgot to cover in the Goose point, we need to talk about Mr. Fury losing his eye to Mr. Goose. You guys were totally fine with that, and I'm fine with it. But I was like, I kind of wanted a bit. I wanted something other than a cat scratch to be the blooming.
I think that's why it
thing.
works for me, because it's Nick Fury's eye, and it's been like this whole like mystique of it.
Right.
What happened to his eye since we met him 10, 11 years ago now? What happened to his eye? And he's like, I'm not telling you. Last time I trusted someone, I lost an eye.
And Loki says it burns you to come so close.
Yeah.
Burned you to get close to a cat.
What could it be? What could it be? And he's fighting the Skrulls, and you're like, the Skrulls are going to do it. And then now it's a cat.
They tease it because there's a bit at the beginning in the car accident, and he holds his eye. Oh, is that how he did it?
Yeah.
But
like
nope.
Very much winking
We kind of called that as almost like a Lenny moment where it's like, no, my eye, I'm not supposed to get Goose in it, or something like that. And I thought it's really because the whole idea of Fury is that he's constantly a master of deception.
Right.
And I know it's presented very comedically at the end when Coulson's just there like, I heard they burned your eye out for not giving them the Tesseract. Like that, I think that's kind of adds to the mystique of the character and kind of presenting all these different false narratives that help him kind of exude this presence as a master spy who can manipulate anyone he wants to.
I think, I don't mind the reality of the cat scratching. I can live. It's fine. Like, I mean, if you read comics, there's a quirky sensibility to comics in general. They do plot twists left, right, and center. It's fine. But I did sort of in my head as I watched it unfold, I was like, oh, but you literally said in Avengers to the crew, like, oh, but after Thor dropped out of the sky, we were hopelessly, hilariously outgunned, and we rethought our strategies. And I'm like, okay, but that with this reality, it means it means that he knew about the aliens since 1995, and then there's the whole wider thing with just I don't know. I thought that weird way of sort of retconning it.
I think that still makes sense because with the Avengers, with this group of superheroes, you've got to really sell it to them that they are the Earth's only hope. If you could just be like, well, this last dropped in 95 and she's been around the galaxy.
She's away now.
I could call her, but I'm not gonna. He needed these group of people. So that's the whole thing with Fury. I think it works perfectly fine because anything Fury presents in the comics is never very. You've always got to take it with a massive grain of salt because he is just a master of deception. So I think it still works.
Yeah, one of the things with Fury, because I've read I've read like Fury's like a couple of Fury solo things and Fury's stuff in the Punisher series, but it's not enough to get a full read of the character. But that idea that he's this like master of deception in terms of like that's all he ever, like, he also has a full hand kind of thing. I always assumed that he had this master plan, like, going from like even the end of the first Iron Man, it was always like he knows everything in this like sort of confident kind of way, and then to sort of undermine him, quote unquote, in Captain Marvel, that was the stuff that kind of jarred with me a little bit in terms of his plan towards getting the weapons from Hydra and planning during the Avengers, and then this thing about the alien invasion. I like that explanation that like he does need them to focus on the task at hand, so it does kind of work. But I mean, what did you think of that twist kind of thing, or that sort of timeline in that fashion?
I'm not really bothered by it because it kind of fits with like how Marvel have approached canon for the last few years.
That's a bigger discussion
since
too.
Like Age of Ultron or something, they just whenever they need to retcon something,
they just do it. Yeah.
So yeah, maybe for the original Avengers, Fury did have this grand plan, but now Captain Marvel's here, so they've got to change it, and I'm alright with that. Like, I don't think it's not a major deal.
I mean, if you go watch the other movie where the Infinity Gauntlet's just sitting on a pedestal, the first Thor.
Fake.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything in Odin's vault.
Fake.
I did love that. That's the thing. I love that they like poke fun at the fact that they also it's been going on for 12 years now, and they've had to sort of go back and forward on things, and they had Hela just like walk up and be fake. We'll just sort of address this later. So I guess there is always scope for them to go back to things in the future. We could talk about another thing as well, which is I was again Kevin Feige. He was asked, like, look, if the invasion of New York or like Ultron's attacks and stuff, were they not on a certain scale where you would have called Captain Marvel? Are they not on enough of a, only for emergencies, but you didn't call them? And Kevin Feige said, well, how do you know that Fury hasn't called Marvel before? So that kind of leads us into potential talks of Captain Marvel 2, because also we have Ronan saying, like, I'll be back, I'll come back to fight the girl, to get the girl. Do you think there's more scope to fill in more of that timeline? Because we have like 95 all the way through to 2012, I think, is when the Avengers is set. So there's a big chunk of time to fill in. Do you think that's what they'll do if they do Captain Marvel, or more, or in the future?
Yeah, I think there's a good chance of saying like a 2005 set sequel.
Black Widow's said to be around that time. I think that's where I think Black Widow's movie's said to be just before Iron Man 2, like in the mid 2000s, like when kind of she defects. So maybe that could lend itself to it as well. I don't know.
I guess it's one of those, like, it kind of ties into where do her powers go from here, where does the character go from here, without breaking where she ends up in Endgame. Like, you can sort of flesh her personality out and do more stuff in the 2000s.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think probably the thing people are most interested in is the idea of Cap Marvel going forward into the timeline. Because I think totally. We've known for a while now that they're building the character to be the leader of the MCU going forward.
Well, that's my question. Like, it's like, do we fill that timeline in more and go down the Feige route of like, well, maybe Nick Fury has to help out in whatever Fury solo movie or Captain Marvel 2, something, or do we go? I'd rather go forward.
Well, there's still stuff to sort out with the Skrulls, because she sets out at the end of the film to find the Skrulls a new homeworld. Who's to say something bad doesn't happen along the way? Maybe Ronan intercepted them as they were traveling. We still don't know. So there is still potential. I know. Yeah.
Quick thoughts on Ronan. Little young Ronan.
I think there was meant to be more of him.
Right.
I noticed this morning, I've been doing an Easter eggs article on Captain Marvel, and there was an image done by Entertainment Weekly back when the film was first like showing all its stuff, and there was when Star Force are getting ready to go to Torfa, Ronan was originally in that scene, and I think they really needed to flesh out Ronan as a more radical element of the Kree. Obviously, they probably realized that Yon-Rogg was that element anyway, but in the comics, he's very much meant to be this kind of like proto-fascist, like kind of antagonist who is an offshoot of the Kree who is far more radical, and they do show that in the film. But all he does is show up to, I'm going to bomb them.
He's sort of like treated as, I mean, he's very like, he's very one-dimensional in is it Guardians? But like you said, like he sort of represents that, he is a big old weapon you can call in, and it's like, you bring, is it the Interceptors?
The Accusers.
The Accusers. And it's like, like Yon-Rogg eventually just like calls for him to come in, and that sort of sets up the big final thing. But yeah, I guess it's weird that they went back to Ronan for me. Like, were you kind of like, here he is again?
He's not great in Guardians.
No.
And he's not great in this. And I kind of think the only way to make it work is bring him back for like every Captain Marvel movie now.
I guess.
Have him do nothing.
He's just there.
Meta running joke.
Yeah. Actually, if they did that, that would make the fact that he gets defeated in a dance battle even better. Because you've sort of made him this long-running joke that climaxes with just being sort of like, fancy kicked into oblivion.
It was very weird because, we also had the bit with Korath kind of ceding his turn to join Ronan when Yon-Rogg's like, don't tell him where they are, and he nearly says it beforehand. So I think I don't know, I didn't need to know why Korath joined Ronan. I just know that happened. So potentially a little bit of an unnecessary explanations going on there, but whatever.
We can dive into, we kind of like touched on it, but the post-credit stuff. like because James wrote a great article on explaining the post-credit stuff, which you can find online. I don't think it's online yet, but I voiced it. James wrote it, I voiced it. It should be online at some point. But you picked up on something which is maybe obvious, but I didn't notice it. In that, at the post-credit scene, we see, like the pager, Nick Fury's pager being, hooked up to a system to try and contact Captain Marvel, and the costumes that everyone has on, we're assuming it's the first half of Endgame, like Natasha's hair or whatever.
Beard?
Yeah, he's still got his beard.
Steve Beard's still there.
Yeah, so like the running theory at the minute is that they're going to try something to fix the snap. It's going to go wrong, and it'll be the second time where it all works.
Yeah.
And so like the Captain Marvel post-credit scene is in the first half of the movie, where she turns up and she's part of that first, whatever that first mission is.
Yeah.
Which is like, I guess, more interesting in a wider sense, because it means she's not just going to turn up and knock Thanos out, or at least not immediately anyway. So what do you guys think of the placement, I guess, in the post-credits?
Yeah, I think not even just first half. I think like very, very close to the beginning, if not something that happens before Endgame. I don't know if they've said that's going to be part of the movie or not. It looks like it's part of the movie.
I think that's a clip from the movie.
It looks like Endgame. And if it is, that's got to be, because Cap has his beard, he's still got a blonde hair, that's got to be really close to just after Infinity War. Yeah. Which means Captain Marvel, we were expecting her to come in and save the day like halfway through. She's going to be there the whole movie.
I'm assuming that, I hope that means that she has a wider role.
I have a theory.
Go on.
I'm going to write it in an article later, so treat this as a sneak peek.
Okay.
But I think that they're going to really make Captain Marvel and Steve Rogers a proper kind of like duo in this. I think in the sense of passing the torch and so on, and how we already know that Brie Larson and Carol Danvers is going to be the leader of the MCU going forward. If this is meant to be Chris Evans's passing of the mantle
like
moment,
kind of
in the comics, it's actually Steve Rogers who encourages Carol Danvers to go by the name of Captain Marvel.
Nice.
So I genuinely think in this film we will see kind of a leadership thing going on between them, and then when the time comes, that's when you see Captain Marvel become Captain Marvel, because they never refer to her as Captain Marvel in this film. Nick Fury dances around it then when he's talking about the Marvelettes and Mr. Postman. But there's definitely, I think there is definitely going to be a thing in Endgame where Captain America kind of a very kind of knowing nod and wink is just kind of like, you're the captain now, kind of like in Captain Phillips.
Yes. There'll be plenty of memes going around after that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that was mentioned before about the different writing teams, but I love the idea that you bring Cap Marvel in at the beginning and you have her for Endgame is what, 3 hours now or something? It's a
long boy.
Yeah, and so like that means that you have very specific things you can do with her powers. You can kind of flesh out her team dynamic with the rest of the crew. We get to see how much she's grown, because it's a pretty big time jump. So I guess just general thoughts on Endgame based on what we now know from Captain Marvel. Like, how do you see the story kind of going based on what she can bring?
I think it's really interesting because it means Captain Marvel's just part of the team rather than the key to it all. And I think that puts a lot more on Ant-Man as well, because there was rumours before Captain Marvel came out.
The Paul Rudd narrative, here it comes.
Maybe he's a Skrull, I'm just saying. Maybe he's a Skrull.
Probably not.
Probably not anymore now.
So there was rumours the Quantum Realm might be in Captain Marvel and stuff like that, and it's now no, this is going to be Ant-Man who takes him into the Quantum Realm. There's got to be something else to do first time, whether that's Captain Marvel goes into space to try and find Thanos. Obviously, she's got the Infinity Stone connection, which could be very important for defeating him.
Could you imagine just Captain Marvel going all the way to Thanos' farm planet and going, come on, change the snap. Nah, I'll be your friend. Please. Nah.
I mean, she assumedly could track down Thanos. I mean, she can move pretty damn fast through space.
Yeah.
Like, we know where he is, I think. Like, he's back on his home planet.
I can't remember. Yeah,
I forget.
Yeah.
That was another theory that he's using the stone to make it look like a better reality stone.
So many stones, so many gems.
True. Ewan, what do you think will happen in terms of Endgame and
I genuinely just think that Brie Larson, Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, whatever analog you want to use, I think they are going to be like the leader going forward. I don't necessarily think, like you said, that it's going to be a narrative of them coming in halfway through the film and doing stuff, because that's not the case anymore. But I genuinely do think that this will be the passing of the torch moment, and it'll be represented by Steve Rogers passing away and Carol Danvers taking on the fight. Sorry, it had to be said. I didn't like saying it either.
I don't like that Mr. Chris Evans got on Twitter and was like, oh, thanks for the last 10 years and my last day of shooting. I'm like, well, don't tell me now. Like, let me wait and see how it goes in the movie.
It doesn't mean he's died.
What does it mean? He's gone on holiday?
That just means he's done. There's other ways to write him out. He's probably going to die.
Maybe he goes back in time and gets to have his dance with Peggy.
Exactly. Imagine that.
Ooh, we did think that. Yeah, I hope so. As long as they do something, do right by Mr. Mr. Cap, and usher in the new age of Cap, which should hopefully go very well. Being that Brie Larson has so much more to do, and you look at any of her wider roles, like this could be one of the most powerful, like one of the best performances on screen. So I hope that going forward she gets way more to do. But for now, this has been the What Culture Film and TV podcast. Let us know what you think down in the comments below, or find us on social media if you're listening on any of the various audio platforms. So yes, we'll catch you guys next time. I've been Scott, the host of the What Culture podcast, joined by James Hunt.
Thank you.
And Ewan Patterson.
And goodbye.
I'll catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.